So I want to talk to you today about what's about to happen to you if you're watching this in the hot seats when you get adjusted. A lot of us, we think about, well, my neck hurts, so I'm going to get adjusted, or my back, and I feel better when I walk out of here. And all those things are great, that your spine's functioning better. But I want to show you some things you might not be thinking about, which is what I think about every time I adjust you, every time we adjust you in here. And that's the reason I get adjusted every 2 weeks and have been for the last 20 years of my life, because I know what's happening to me when I do get adjusted. So every single time you get adjusted, these things are happening. Number one, your cerebral spinal fluid is flowing better, draining waste products out of your brain. So the way your brain is actually able to drain metabolic waste products out is through cerebral spinal fluid. So you have this fluid that's around your brain, it bathes your brain and your spinal cord, and it has no pump. It doesn't have a heart to pump it like your blood, so it pumps through motion. So normal motion of your occiput, which is the first bone in the spine here, and the normal motion of your sacrum, which is the last bone in your spine. When those things are moving properly, when you're walking around and everything's working the way it should, it drains waste products out of the brain, because that cerebral spinal fluid is bathing the brain and pulling what's called beta amyloid proteins out of there, which is why we don't get Alzheimer's around here. So every time you get adjusted, you're preventing Alzheimer's from happening. And I know that because you can actually do a test, a spinal fluid test, to find out how much beta amyloid protein you have stuck in there, and they can actually tell you your likelihood of having Alzheimer's. So the less beta amyloid proteins you have in the brain and the spinal cord, the less likely you are to have Alzheimer's disease. Well, every time you get adjusted, that CSF is pumping the beta amyloid out of the brain and spinal cord and flushing it out through your lymphatic system. So every single time you get adjusted, you're decreasing your likelihood of ever ending up in that Alzheimer's nursing home, which to me is absolutely huge, because that tends to be something that my family's dealt with over the years. So every time I get adjusted, my cerebral spinal fluid is working better, so is yours. Another thing that's happening, your CD4 and T cells are working 40% better. For the next 48 hours, they actually do blood tests. You get adjusted, right? So this is a cool test where they'll do blood tests on your CD4 cells, you get adjusted, and then they'll do blood tests again right after you get adjusted. And those CD4 cells, which are your main immune system cells, are working 40% better right after the adjustment. You get a 40% immune system boost right after the adjustment, which is why I have people, like if you're expressing symptoms, I don't call it getting sick, I call it if you're expressing symptoms, that's when you want to get adjusted, right? So somebody told me the other day, well, I wasn't feeling good, so I stayed home. No, that's when you want to get adjusted, right? So if you're puking, bring a bucket. And that's one thing that I feel like has happened with COVID, is everybody's like, everybody stay away from everybody all the time. When you're contagious for most, like if you have a cold and you're contagious, it's usually before you even notice that you have the cold. That's when you're most contagious. So you're already spreading it before you even know that you have the thing, right? And if you want to come after the shift and it's just us adjusting you, that's fine, but I'm not scared of your germs. So if you have a cold or something like that, I welcome you to come in, get adjusted, get your immune system working, because my immune system is working, and I know that my immune system is strong enough to fight off whatever you're trying to pass on to me, because that's the way the immune system works, is through challenges. So the bottom line is, if you are expressing symptoms, and adjustment's the best thing for you. If you're not expressing symptoms, then the adjustment's the best things for you, because that's what's going to keep that immune system working, so you're not contracting every cold and flu that's going around the neighborhood. Okay, so every time you get adjusted, your immune system's working better. Number three, the discs are rehydrated, so you actually stop shrinking. So when you're doing your wobbles right there, instead of doing a wobble where you're just kind of sitting here like this, we really want you moving your body as much as you can, because when you do that, you're actually helping to rehydrate the discs, because shrinking happens. If you see people when they shrink when they get older, it's because the discs, the spaces in between the bones, okay, which are this red thing right here, that will actually start to decrease and shrink over time, and it starts to come down together like this, which can cause all kinds of spinal problems. But the biggest thing it does is cause you to shrink overall. There's a great research study that shows men that shrink up to an inch over time increase the risk of dying of a heart attack by 68%. Why would that be? Because what's happening is you're compressing the nerves in the middle part of the back that go to the heart. So that's why you're increasing your risk of heart disease and heart attack when you shrink. So every time you get adjusted, we're rehydrating those discs through normal motion of the spine, getting more water and nutrients, and stopping that shrinking process. I've actually seen people get 1/4 of an inch taller over time because the discs are actually rehydrated, so you're stopping shrinking. Number four, serum thiol levels are increased. Serum thiol is the #1 marker of DNA repair. Okay, so every time you get adjusted, right afterwards, your serum thiol is you have more serum thiol in your blood, and thiol is what goes in and cuts out the bad DNA. And this is how incredible your body is. every single second of your life, your immune system and your nervous system is looking for nicks and damage to the DNA, and it's repairing that DNA. And it goes in there and unzips the DNA, cuts out the bad base pairs, replaces it with good DNA through mRNA, and then replaces it with good DNA. That's what happens every time you get adjusted. So you're actually, when you age and you develop degeneration and degenerative illnesses, it's because the DNA got damaged. Well, when you get adjusted, guess what's happening? That DNA damage is being reversed, right? So you're literally younger after you get adjusted than you were beforehand. So anti-aging is the best thing. This one down here, blood pressure decreases because your autonomic nervous system is being regulated. So when we adjust you in the middle part of your back, like if I do the middle back adjustment when you're on your back and your arms are crossed, or we're doing it with the instrument, that's stimulating what's called your parasympathetic nervous system, which is rest, digest, and heal. It takes you out of fight or flight. I just had a patient whose blood pressure was like 155 over 100. She came in, we did that adjustment, she went home and she sent me an email. She said her blood pressure came down 25 points just from the adjustment. And you know what the number one cause of death is in the world right now? It's high blood pressure. That's a life-saving, that's why there should be lines around the office every single day. If people just knew that, if people knew that their blood pressure could be fixed by getting adjusted and they didn't have to take these medications the rest of their life, it would change everything. It's the number one cause of death, and that's being prevented every time you get adjusted. And then the last one, 20% increase in prefrontal cortex activity. So we don't talk about very much what happens to the brain, but when you get adjusted, you get more input into the brain and through different pathways. One of them is through your frontal lobe. Your frontal lobe is what's responsible for your emotion and your memory. So like anxiety and depression, those things get better. Memory gets better. Every single time you get adjusted, you are better than you were before. So that's the reason I get adjusted and will for the rest of my life, because and I happen to get adjusted and I don't have to pay for my adjustments, but I would gladly pay for my adjustments. I pay for plenty of other things for my health. The reason I would do that, and the reason I will when I can no longer get adjusted in here, I'll still go pay somebody. And the reason I do that is because chiropractic doesn't cost, it actually saves. So look at these numbers on what happens. This is over 7 years, people who chose chiropractors as their primary source for health, which means they've been getting adjusted, right? And they're in maintenance care, so getting adjusted every couple of weeks, and the chiropractor is their primary source of health care, which means they go to the chiropractor before they go to their doctor who's going to give them medication. They go see if they can get their body working right at the chiropractor first, which is what I want for all of you. But look at that when you do that. What that equaled is 60% less hospital admissions. So these people were in the hospital 60% less than all of the other people that just went to the doctor. They had 59% less hospital days, 62% less outpatient surgeries and procedures, right? All of the things that people do. And then this is the big one, 85% less pharmaceutical cost. They spent 85% less on pharmaceutical and drugs than anybody else did because they weren't on all these drugs. Because when they get adjusted, their blood pressure was down. They didn't need the drugs. They weren't on Alzheimer's drugs. They weren't on antibiotics every time they got sick, because they weren't getting sick because their immune system was working every single time you get adjusted. And the biggest thing that's not on there, they spent 70% less than the national average on their health. I would much rather spend a little bit of money on my chiropractic care, my lifestyle, my organic food, and the things that I do there, my going to the gym. I'd rather spend a little bit of money on that as an investment, because it's a huge investment. You're spending 70% less than the national average on your health if chiropractic care is your primary source of health and you've been getting adjusted on a regular basis. So that's why I get adjusted. That's what's going to happen when you go back and lay on that table.